Hey guys, thanks for 25,000 subs. Yeah, I know this video is really late, but I finally got it done, and it's also ridiculously long, so let me go over the rules real quick and we'll get this underway. I only had two rules when I was putting this together. The first was that there could only be one song per producer, and that this is exclusively only my top 10 Vocaloid tracks, so there's no title or covers in this, mostly because it just would have been way too difficult for me to choose. With that out of the way, these are my top 10 favorite Vocaloid tracks. I hope you enjoy. I've come to realize that it's impossible for me to look at Puzzle without getting immediately blindsided by nostalgia. I know this song probably wouldn't clear anyone else's top 10, but it holds a special place for me because it was my introduction to Vocaloid. I've grown up going to conventions my whole life, like many of you I'm sure, but going to Otakon specifically had to be one of the biggest highlights for me every single year during high school and college. As a teenager, it taught me a lot about the anime community. A lot of good things, and a lot of things that I like to forget. But as a 14-year-old, one thing that consistently bothered me was seeing this girl with blue pigtails everywhere I went. And on top of that, you would see merchandise for her everywhere in the dealer's hall. I had no idea who she was or what she even came from, but it bugged me so much that I started to research it until I found out her name was Hatsune Miku. Curious, I typed the name into YouTube and this was the first song I clicked on. And I can still remember the exact video too, as you're seeing on screen. That was just how large of an impact that first moment with Vocaloid really left on me. Yes, I have a bias towards this song because it was my first, but I also just have a general respect for Kuwagata P as a producer. The man was just an absolutely gifted guitar player, and it's a skill that's been overlooked for many years in my eyes. No matter what kind of song he was putting out, you could always be certain that the guitar work was always going to be impeccable. The way he slides down the neck of his guitar during that bridge is so tranquil and peaceful, only to become overwhelmingly beautiful as the guitar instantly picks up for that solo. It's true that the tuning and piano aren't the most impressive, but even then they still convey the emotion of the piece. I can't help but love the passion behind that one ridiculous high note towards the end. And the way the song finishes as Miku holds that final note is still tear-inducing for me. I think we all have that one song that we continue to cherish regardless of how we change as we grow up. And for me, Puzzle will always be that song. I think some of you will immediately raise an eyebrow at seeing me pick Stratostella as my favorite Nayutan Seijin song. I mean, we're talking about the same artist that has made so many countless great hits. But for me, Nayutan Seijin was always at his best when he was just making carefree rock songs. There's absolutely nothing groundbreaking about Stratostella. But this song also didn't have to exist under the same expectations that Alien Alien or Comet Honeymoon did, which is being the lead single for a brand new album. A pressure where people are expecting something exciting and brand new. Stratostella was one of the last tracks to be released for its debut, and quite literally the last song on that album. A track from the get-go that was most likely to be ignored by most people. But because of that, there was no pressure in what he ended up releasing. You can deeply respect everything a groundbreaking artist has made, but sometimes just seeing a musician make music in a situation where there's no risks or expectations can be just as freeing for the audience as it is for the composer. And this song's strength lies in just how loose and over the top everything feels. The catchy prominent guitar riff, the intensity of the messy drums crashing throughout the track. There's even a bass solo towards the end that feels completely unnecessary, but I will fight you if you try to remove it. And don't even get me started on the tuning. The random vocal cracks, the way the vocals just seem to float across the instrumental, and sweet dear lord, that vocal solo at the end still gives me goosebumps. You could just tell how much fun he was having while writing it. And yet, I would never expect a fun track like this to carry such a heavy message as well. The lyrics deal heavily with the aftermath of losing someone you love, trying to come to terms that everyone might not leave without regrets, that they even might try to hurt you as well. It forces Strato into a constant state of questioning if they did everything they could for Stella. Yet there's no peace to be found in living in the past, that sometimes you have to be willing to accept things for what they are. How Strato finally makes amends is by realizing that people can change. Time, pressure, and circumstances take a drastic toll on any of us. It can even cause us to drift apart from the ones we love the most. But that doesn't mean that they stop caring for us. It makes that final calm sayonara so devastating because it could either be Strato finally letting go, or Stella coming to their senses long enough to give Strato the farewell they deserve. A song taken from the perspective of a young girl over-dramatizing her relationship, on paper seems like a recipe for disaster. But there's an emotional intensity in Romeo and Cinderella that still leaves me speechless to this day. It really is a situation where execution is everything. That shredding electric guitar, those airy piano keys, the hypnotic synth line, they all mix together to give this otherwise trivial love affair a real feeling of weight and intensity. There's a tension that seems to keep building as our protagonist becomes more frustrated with their situation. And you know at some point that the bubble just has to burst. And when that sensor beep goes off and the chorus begins, I'm just never ready for those strings. I've never seen a song that is able to capture the beauty of a moment like Romeo and Cinderella does. Every word that Miku sings here just demands your attention. You can't help but get caught up in the moment like she is, as the strings cry out in agony at the whole situation. Every sentence is just emphasized by a furious draw across that bow. It perfectly conveys that fragile unstableness that relationships, or even crushes, gave us growing up, where you feel like your whole world would crumble if you were pulled away from that significant other. But there's also a disturbing level of realism and brutal honesty here. The stress that carrying secrets and lies has on us, or the way desire can be distorted as love or fulfillment. It feels a bit ironic because the song almost feels like a social commentary. When we're dismissive about having real conversations about uncomfortable subjects, it can lead to real stories similar to the one displayed in Romeo and Cinderella. Frankly, I've always respected the fact that the song wasn't afraid to talk about sex. To me, Japan's obsession with the beauty of innocence has always felt unrealistic and even at times sexist. I do find the provocative art to be a little much, especially when this is supposed to be a 16-year-old girl. But I was always able to look past it for the fact that Doriko was one of those few producers at that time who was willing to explore territory like this without it feeling immature or just pure clickbait. I like to think that he made this song to display the idea that any relationship between two people who truly care about each other should be viewed as important, no matter how trivial or insignificant it might appear to an outsider. Kikuo, in my opinion, will go down as one of the greatest producers to ever pick up Vocaloid. Despite the fact that he's been making music for years now, he's arguably only getting better with every project. Every song he writes not only seems to capture my imagination, but vastly expands my understanding of what's possible with music. His incredible talent with so many different instruments. His unprecedented ability to create atmosphere in his songs. There's an attention to detail and precision that extends well past just Vocaloid, and arguably makes him one of the best composers of our time. And Aishite, 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 in my opinion, is his definitive work. Look, I know as a Kikuo fan, picking this track is like saying Creep is your favorite Radiohead song, but I've always respected the fact that the song seems to strike a balance between two sides. It's short and catchy enough to make it accessible to a large audience, yet focused and bold enough in his message that it never betrays what made him so incredible. That's a feat that very few musicians will ever be able to do. The faint accordion, the frantic xylophone, that raspy every piece of the song serves a purpose suited to enhancing the atmosphere, while simultaneously seducing you as it effortlessly captures your ears. Whenever I listen to anything Kikuo writes, I feel like I'm being transported to another world. Like falling down that rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland, there's something so charming yet deeply unsettling about it. You can't help but feel exposed and helpless when an artist can isolate you from the rest of the world like that. You feel like you're completely at their mercy. Hearing this grown woman delusionally justify her actions as her greed and lust only seem to grow is absolutely horrific. Yet it's only heightened by her conflicting cries of agony as she apologizes for those said decisions. It's like she has no control over what she's doing. You can't help but feel guilty for carelessly sitting there and listening to her slowly lose her mind, for your very own pleasure. It makes you start to question who's the real monster, you or her. What's there to say about Kagero Days that hasn't already been said? It might have not been the first song in the Kagero project, but it certainly was the one that put Gene on the map, spawning a media empire that would greatly shape the face of Vocaloid for years to come. But I think what I love the most about this song in particular is how well it works outside of this project. You don't really need to know any background about this franchise to truly appreciate how compelling this narrative is. The intro to the song will lead you to believe it's a standard slice of life story. I mean, it's just two kids spending their summer together without a care in the world. Until that cat jumps out of her arms, she chases after it, and I don't care who you are. You were never ready to see her get hit by that truck. Yet, why did the day repeat suddenly after he passes out? Why did she smile when she got impaled this time? Why was Hibiya being forced to watch her die over and over like this? I found myself glued to the screen just trying to dissect every lyric. Maybe I've always been a sucker for time loop narratives, but it baffles me how Gene was able to tell this whole story in just a 4-minute song. It's hard enough as it is to write a compelling story on its own, but making one fit a melody as well? It really limits how much you can write, especially when you have to make sure that every word is staying on beat. It's a challenge for many musicians that I think few of us ever really think about. Yet that's exactly the mark of a well-written song, when the audience is so engrossed in what you have to say that you completely forget that you're even listening to a song in the first place. That's how I feel every time I listen to this song. It's a story that just pulls you out of the world. That's especially impressive when you remember how much the original music video left to your imagination, before Gene had the budget to hire animators or fans to do all the work for him. What helped is that the song was structured to have all the major deaths appear at the chorus. From a storytelling standpoint, this gave the narrative a heightened sense of tension. You could feel yourself growing restless just knowing that something very wrong was about to happen. So when all those instruments explode during the chorus, it perfectly conveys that dazed out-of-body experience the protagonist is having, but also a level of just pure insanity. When he throws himself in front of that truck at the end, you can really feel all the logic in his mind just snap. I know Kagero Days might not seem that big of a deal today, but this song was so groundbreaking in 2011. No one had ever tried a narrative like this in Vocaloid and made a successful hit out of it. It spawned a whole generation of dark narrative-driven songs that we're still seeing to this day. Since his rise to fame in the early 2010s, Mari2 has quickly grown to be one of my favorite producers of all time. I truly believe there are few producers out there who can match the consistent level of quality and experimentation that he brings to his sound. I mean, who else can combine so many different genres of music and still make it feel so natural? Still, I don't think he'll ever write a song again that will capture my imagination like Brain Revolution Girl did. Rock is a medium that has been beaten to death in Vocaloid. Even 10 years ago, if you asked me how to stand out in this scene, I still tell you to please do not make another pop rock track. And yet when Brain Revolution Girl came out, it took everyone by surprise. This small track from a collaboration project had ended up being one of the largest hits that came out that year. So what made it so different from everything that came before it? Well, the aspect of this song that always stuck out to me was the lack of guitar. Not that it isn't there, but note how Mari2 purposely pushes it to the back of this mix. Instead of letting it lead like 90% of his competition, now it's only there to complement the rest of this piece. I love this because it forces the artist into this corner where they have to consider every element of their song. If listeners are going to clearly hear every aspect of this piece, then every instrument, even the vocals, has to serve a clear purpose. The bass and synths work in tandem to provide this dark yet joyous atmosphere. It's like stepping into a deranged carnival. The drums, my favorite aspect of this song, perfectly play off of this manic nature. Each hit just has a fresh pop to it that makes it feel so prominent. It perfectly complements the sporadic nature of these vocals. Speaking of the vocals, the tuning is just otherworldly. There is the weirdest sense of satisfaction I get hearing the way the vocals ring every time Miku finishes a verse. The way she playfully bounces across that beat almost conveys this whimsical nature despite the dark subject matter. It perfectly matches that instrumental. And when that guitar finally does take the front stage during the solo, it only makes it more memorable as a result. I think most musicians are scared to take risks like this, because there's so much about this song that instinctively should ruin its flow. The way the vocals abruptly stopped or the constant shifts in melody throughout the track. Yet the reason we remember producers like Maritu is because he was willing to push boundaries. He was gifted enough to make all these insane elements fit together, and you can't take one aspect of the song out for it not to lose what made it so special. And I think that's why this song perfectly encapsulates just what makes him so amazing. For multiple years now, Yeonju Metro P, or as I call him 40MP, has been my go-to artist when introducing Vocaloid to someone new. He approaches his music with a level of professionalism that I think anyone can appreciate. The arrangement of songs like Cutoff Line or Eye Examination are not just impressive, but are downright enchanting at points. Laced with intricate arrangements of banjos, xylophones, and horns, it's really no wonder why he became so popular during the early 2010s. He wasn't just ahead of his competition, he was practically running laps around them. But Karikuri Piro was a song that took his career to a whole new level in my eyes, because it corrected the one issue that I always had with his music, a lack of emotional depth. The first time that curtain comes up and the music box plays, you could instantly tell that something was off. That warm, bright texture had been swapped for a cool sensation of melancholy and dread. Then that piano rolls, and it's like all those cars are being blown away by the sheer magnitude of this sound. Here was a song that took advantage of 40MP's wide range of talents with instruments. The lively banjos of Cutoff Line, the tranquil piano of Time Machine, it's all here. But what makes it so breathtaking is how he uses them. Each piano note during the verses seems to emphasize the frustration of the protagonist as she cries out, while the frantic string arrangement during the chorus seems to perfectly convey that idea of panic as her emotions well up within her. Each instrument works in tandem to convey this idea of an emotional roller coaster. And it's not that Karikuri Piro was necessarily superior from an arrangement standpoint, it's just that 40MP had finally figured out how to effectively use these instruments to tell a story. When that bridge hits and all these different instruments collide, it creates an absolutely breathtaking final chorus. There's an emotion I get seeing and hearing this that I'll never be able to put into words. But it's almost like the song is coming to life. The world seems to blur into that golden sunset as she slowly takes off that mask to reveal the tears running down her face. It's like the whole arrangement is crying out with her in that moment. Every single time I see that single tear run down the side, I get a chill down my spine as she belts out that final note. Seeing someone take so much abuse and finally letting it out all at once, it just crushes you as a person. For a song that offers no answers to these ideas of isolation, rejection, or depression, it's incredible how much it says just through its delivery alone. When I go back to the early 2000s, there's a certain aesthetic about these songs that I love. The choppy tuning, the simple lyrics, and that questionable audio quality. Yet despite releasing in 2008, Meltdown still sounds as mesmerizing as the day it was first released. And despite the impact that this song has had on Vocaloid as a whole, I've never seen a producer make a pop track better than it. Which is so baffling to me because have you ever heard of another song written by Iroha? It might be the biggest case of a one-hit wonder in Vocaloid history. He drops the definitive Kagemine Ren track, one of the few tracks that any of us can agree will definitely represent the legacy of Vocaloid for years to come, and completely disappears after that. It's like all that creative potential went into just this one song. And everyone, even back in 2008, knew it was a masterpiece. The reception to this song was so high that people started to make fake accounts just to boost the score of this song on the rankings. It got so bad that Iroha had to actually ask people to stop. And when that didn't work, he had to delete the original video and re-upload it to Nagimiso's account to disqualify it. Yet despite that lack of advertising, that re-upload currently stands at 9 million views. Meltdown was an unstoppable force from the moment it was dropped. I mean, honestly, how couldn't it be? In 2008, what song had this kind of care and production put into it? With those dreamy synth lines, that sharp string arrangement, and the heavenly piano keys, it's like being trapped in a hazy dream that you can never wake up from. The next time you listen to this song, I want you to focus on just the tuning. Notice how much weight Ren's voice carries, how breathtaking every high note is, as those airy vocals ring out across that endless vast sea. You can almost feel every single word reverberating into your soul. There's been plenty of songs that have defied my expectations, but when do you get a song that completely makes you reimagine what's possible with music? Because Meltdown is one of those few songs that has made me feel that way about Vocaloid. After you hear it, it's impossible not to hold every other song to that same level of quality and perfection. It has a timeless sound that I think anyone can love and appreciate. I think anyone watching this already knew that Wowaka was going to be on this list. The real challenge here was just narrowing this down to one song. When you're talking about the same artist who wrote World's End Dance Hall, Two-Faced Lovers, and Unhappy Refrain, I mean, even a casual fan of his music would have issues picking a favorite. But in the end, I chose Rolling Girl above all of them. Why? Well, to me, Rolling Girl has always stood as Wowaka's anthem. This song has become so universally loved that if you couldn't recognize its piano melody in the first 5 seconds, it would tell anyone that you're brand new to this fandom. The term Molikai alone is probably one of the most quoted in Vocaloid history. It speaks volumes to the impact that Wowaka really had as a songwriter. It's one of the few pieces of music that I could simultaneously call elegant, yet completely manic. The piano is sharp and precise in delivery, while the drums are overwhelmingly chaotic. It's like rain beating down on pavement. Yet, have you ever noticed how none of these instruments have to fight for your attention? Everything is perfectly balanced and harmonized. I can always hear the strings of the guitar ring out, the bass line perfectly complementing that beat, the vocals still taking their place at the front of the song, yet the drums still contain that overwhelming punch and weight. To this day, I still haven't figured out how he managed to do it. It's incredible. I've talked about it before, but it's genius the way Wowaka would start his songs by putting everything on the table. It works especially well in Rolling Girl because it ties into this idea that life is a constant race against time. From the moment we're born, we're all chasing after our own dreams. Whether we want to admit it or not, we know that death can take us at any second, that every day the doors are closing on who we can become. But the protagonist of this song seems to know that better than anyone, as she constantly keeps getting up after failing over and over again. That intense speed of the drums and piano can be so disorienting, but it perfectly encapsulates her mental state. Her world is practically spinning as the failures she has to endure are slowly eating away at her endurance, as the world is practically taunting her to finally let go. And as those drums thrash and anxiety wells up within her, the song suddenly breaks off, telling us that she finally had to let go. reminding us of how fickle life can really be. I love this song because it feels like, in Wawaka's own way, he's warning us of the dangers of stagnation, that you need to live every day to its fullest and be grateful for every second that you have. Wawaka was only 31 when he passed away, yet despite that, he managed to become a musician that touched the hearts of millions across the globe. And like many creators, I probably wouldn't be talking to you today if it wasn't for the impact that this song created. It's more than just a song, it's a living testament to a man that managed to do so much in so little of time. May you rest in peace, Wawaka. I remember back in 2013 when I first made an account on Nico Nico. It was a mesmerizing experience. It was directly within that Renaissance era of Vocaloid, when it seemed like a groundbreaking track was dominating the charts every single week. But there was one song in particular that year that you couldn't escape no matter where you went. A song so unexpected that it completely flipped the community on its head. It was a song called Donut Hole. I, at the time, knew nothing about Hachi. I had no idea the weight that name carried within the community or the fact that he had left Vocaloid 2 years prior. But naturally, I let my curiosity get the better of me and clicked on it. And I was immediately turned off. My ears were bombarded by this chain of unintelligible noises. This high-pitched sample of a girl that sounded on the verge of a mental breakdown, a sporadic guitar line that felt maliciously filled with dissonance. Not to mention, the art almost had a grimy quality to it that made it extremely uncomfortable to watch. Completely traumatized, I turned it off after a minute and swore to never listen to it again, concluding that this community must be out of their right mind. But the funny thing about life is that sometimes the things that disturb us can leave a larger impact than the things that we love. Because a month later, I found myself drawn back to it, and said, well, I didn't finish it the last time, I should at least commit. And before I knew it, I couldn't turn it off. Years later, that guitar melody I once called sporadic, I would praise for being experimental and boundary pushing. The bizarre repetitive vocal sample, in hindsight, was genius. At the time, it was a practice hardly used in Vocaloid, and really gave the song a unique charm. While the music video is simple, it was so effective at complementing the music. The bizarre positions of the characters, the photo silhouettes, it made everything feel like a fever dream. There was a real sense of unease you got watching those scratched out faces while those drums came hammering down. In a certain light, Donut Hole could be viewed as the largest betrayal of Yonezu's career. The song had essentially defied every expectation that he, the community, and the fans had built up about Hachi as a creator. Where were the synths, my sporadic drum lines, the dark, vivid music video? In many ways, it was a song that could only be created by a post-Vocaloid Yonezu. In an interview with Real Sound a year later, he actually confessed that his time in Vocaloid had kept him in a constant state of self-consciousness. Yes, this had been the community that built his career, but there was certainly a pressure to live up to those expectations. The result was music that never really felt like his, but more of what the community wanted him to create. When he was making Diorama, he was even asked by his team if he would consider making a cover album of his Vocaloid tracks, and he firmly rejected the notion, because those were songs specifically made for that space on Nico Nico. But Donut Hole was different, because it was the first track that he made that he felt a desire to sing himself. In fact, it ended up being the last track on his sophomore album, Yankee. The lines between Hachi and Yonezu were finally beginning to blur. And I think that's why it's my favorite Vocaloid song. Because it was a song that has simultaneously combined everything that made his work as Hachi so memorable, while incorporating everything that made Yankee so special at that time as well. It was a song that combined the best elements of my favorite producer's career. And man, I didn't even get a chance to go over the lyrics to this song. You know, there's actually a really interesting backstory about how this song ties into the rest of Yankee, and implications that it could even be about Hachi himself. It's almost like someone should make a video about this. Yeah, wouldn't that be something? Thanks for watching.